These live streams are made possible by the generous support of the Sarah B. Folk Charitable Fund and by our community of subscribers. Special thanks to our Virtuoso level subscribers and lifetime Caffe Lena members. By buying a ticket for this performance, you're supporting independent music and the mission of our historic nonprofit venue. Enjoy your front row seats for this show, live from Caffe Lena.
Guai Nitonbak, hello, my friends. It has become customary to offer a quick land acknowledgement to recognize where we are, who was here and who remains here, and our responsibilities to this place. And so in the Abenaki language, the language of my ancestors, the language that we still speak and teach, I'm going to say those words and translate them quickly for you. Nikombi, Nkadi, Mojasa, Alame Kawogik, and Dakina. I would like to welcome you to our homelands in Dakina, this land. Kwisirwaha, Nikon Kokowaki, Ta Soki Gwez, Yizik, Kadalomalomba, Magwak, Tawabanakiak. And we acknowledge this place as the territory of the Mohican, the Mohawk, and the Abenaki people. Kada alami ka womb na maji malika sani hadit ta jajigo wa hadit wajiwe nana waldo mak yodali nkwa gwa waj nana koko la kawogon na kawol ta lowi kiowo. We thank them for their strength and their resilience in protecting this place and continuing to protect it. And all of us will try our best to uphold our responsibilities to this earth as they have done.
Good evening. Welcome to Caffe Lena. Thank you, Joe, for starting us out, reminding us that our roots are deep and our story is long. I am truly excited, as I know all of you are who believe so much in this cause tonight, to see this room full. I'm very sorry that we couldn't accommodate everybody who wanted to come tonight, but isn't that exciting? So, when a trio of local activists approached Caffe Lena a few months ago about hosting a banned books Little Free Library in the courtyard here, I had no idea how much passion was going to be poured into this project. Those three women are fully committed to making the world a better place, and they are Linda Latender, Nancy Weber, and our team leader, Pat Nugent. All right. So that book box is going to be in Caffe Lena's courtyard, but it is a community project, and I want to just run through some thank yous. And I'm just, like we do at Poetry Open Mic, I'll say, you don't have to clap after every one. So Pat's friend, Tom Kinski, is the one who built the book box. It's rock solid. It is first class. He really put his heart into it. When Linda Latender came forward and said that she had a friend, an artist who was willing to decorate the box, that friend, an incredible Saratoga artist named Cam Cameron, created what must surely be one of the most beautiful little free libraries anywhere. And make sure that you look at every side of it when you leave tonight. It's right next to the doors where you came in downstairs. Every single side of it is decorated. It's just ornate and wonderful, and we thank her. A very illustrious group of organizations from this area stepped forward to endorse and sponsor the Little Liberty Library, and we have some reps here from each organization. So I want you to just give a wave or a hoot or something that suits you when I call you out, because when your organization stepped forward to participate, it gave credibility and stature to this project, and we're so proud and grateful to have you on board. So we're gonna go alphabetically. I'm not doing anything like prioritizing anybody, but Caffe Lena. So we have some of our board members here, Margot Olson, Peter Martin, our president, Kira Favreau. And when I asked the board at one of our monthly meetings if we could do this project, they were like, that sparks joy. So it was like unequivocal enthusiasm. The League of Women Voters, Saratoga County board members, Pat Partello, Carol Glansberg, State Board Member Patty Garrett, thank you so much for your important work, League of Women Voters. Saratoga Springs Public Library is standing firm against any efforts to remove books from their collection. Library board members Carol Daggs and Terrence Diggory are here. They're going to actually be part of the program, but we thank them for their voluntary service on our library board. Skidmore College, Scribner College librarian, Dr. Marta Bruner is with us. Thank you. Temple Sinai is represented by Michael Marks tonight. He's one of the trustees of Temple Sinai. Thank you. The Unitarian Universalist Society of Saratoga Springs is represented tonight officially by Effie Redmond. Thank you. Yaddo staffers, Christy Albano, Michelle Hanna, and Angie Schlansker and her daughter, who brought a great book, are with us tonight. Let's pack this box with all the books that your wonderful authors have written that have been banned. New York State Writers Institute was not able to send a representative tonight, but we thank them for their long leadership on this issue. So each organization has submitted a statement that you can read in those programs. If you didn't pick up a program and you want one, there are probably more in the lobby. Or maybe not, I only made 100. So before I introduce tonight's MC, Barbara Lombardo, I just want to say one thing on behalf of Caffe Lena. A commitment to free speech is hard, but a commitment to listening to free speech with compassion and honor and integrity is even harder. Salman Rushdie said, "It's very, very easy not to be offended by a book. You just have to shut it." There will be books in that box that you won't like, books that will stir up bad memories, outrage, disgust. Read them if you can stand it, or shut them. Let's just not ban them, because they represent somebody's story that is part of our collective human story, and it will mean something to someone, and they need to exist. The Little Liberty Library feels like a righteous project, but it's not about scoring a blow against our enemies. It's about not allowing anyone's experience to be erased, especially when it's the experience of our foe. We need to know those experiences. It's about knowing everyone. And Salman Rushdie also said, "The only thing worse than a bad review from the Ayatollah Khomeini would be a good review from the Ayatollah Khomeini." So may his courage and tenacity inspire all of us. Barbara Lombardo. Barbara has been teaching reporting and news writing at the University of Albany part-time since 2008, hoping to encourage a new generation of journalists. Grooming journalists is in her blood. Her full-time job for almost 4 decades until 2015 was running the newsroom of the Saratogian, and for her last couple of years there, running the Troy Record newsroom as well. During her tenure, Barbara earned statewide and national honors for her columns and her editorials on local issues. You may hear her on occasion on the panel of the Media Project, WAMC's weekly program discussing media coverage of current events. Thank you again for being here. Please welcome Barbara Lombardo.
Wow, look at all these naughty people. So glad to hear you. Thank you, Sarah. It's my privilege to welcome you here tonight and to be introducing these amazing, talented authors who have volunteered to read, not from their own work, but from books that have been banned, from the books of their choice. The genesis for this evening began when Linda Latender called Patricia Nugent and said, "Let's go for a walk." She had an agenda, and by the end of, they were into it by maybe 2 miles, and Linda had come up with the idea of the Little Liberty Library, and Pat recognized the need to have a home for the library and to have a place to give a voice to the authors. And Caffe Lena was, of course, the perfect fit. So happy to be here tonight. Each of tonight's authors will explain why they picked the book they did and why it was banned. The readings are in chronological order by date of publication, and I noticed that every decade, or almost every decade since the 1930s, is represented. We know that book banning is not new. What is new, as a columnist in The Guardian wrote, is the intensity of the assault to silence unwanted perspectives and protect the status quo. What is new is the powerful use of social media, the LGBTQ as targets, the number of well-organized, well-funded challenges nationwide from primarily right-wing Christian conservatives, and the methods that are being used to impose their will. Book banning is wrong if it comes from the left or the right, even when the motive is ostensibly to prevent pain or embarrassment or to feel like you're spreading hate or intolerance. It's still censorship. When books are banned, opportunities to understand the world around us and other people are scuttled. And when a person, a child or an adult, recognizes themselves in a character or in a storyline in a book that has been banned, the not so subtle message is, there is something wrong with you. The American Library Association in 2021 recorded 729 official book challenges targeting almost 1,600 titles, more than double the number from the year before. 1 in 3 of the books challenged involve LGBTQ themes. Others focus on communities of color and America's history of racism. You'll hear passages tonight from 2 of the books that were among the most banned in 2021. In a variety of states, laws are being enacted to make it easier to remove books from libraries, to change how library board members are appointed, to constrain what is being read in the schools, and to challenge existing laws that now protect librarians and teachers from prosecution should they dare to share material that someone else deems offensive. In some places, librarians have been bullied into submission or hounded out of, and sometimes fired from, their jobs. And around the country, including right here, people who seek to restrict the availability of books whose themes they deem inappropriate are acquiring power. They are running for school boards and local government positions or supporting candidates of like mind. Check out groups like Conservative Chicks, or Moms for Liberty, or Parents Defending Education, which describes itself, and I'll quote, as a national grassroots organization working to reclaim our schools from activists promoting harmful agendas. They are prepared to legislate, litigate, and support local efforts to meet their goals. Okay, so most of us would agree that consideration needs to be given to the age appropriateness of material. And most of us can agree that it seems reasonable for parents to want to know what their children are reading. But more of us need to be alert to those seeking to force their values, their fears on everyone. And we know that book banning is just one piece of this movement. As Sarah mentioned, I was at the Saratogian for almost 40 years, most of the time running the newsroom. In the last several years before I left in 2015, the owners cut the staff until I found it to be not just difficult, it was always difficult, but virtually impossible to meet what I consider to be the most vital role of a local newspaper, that of community watchdog. Who is following the people who are showing up at school board meetings or running for school board or government office? This is a problem not just here, but all over the country. Now, as a teacher at the University of Albany teaching journalism, I hope to groom a new generation each semester of reporters who will find jobs and will at the very least be savvy news consumers. And I told them in class today, it just started this week, that we'll be using the book banning issue in class to look at how do you report this? How do you find both sides? Is there both sides to this issue? How do you decide what's credible? How do you tell the story? And there are stories of hope. Margaret Atwood raised money for the anti-censorship group PEN America with an unburnable edition of her book, A Handmaid's Tale. I love it. That book is on tonight's program. I don't know if it's an unburnable edition. A CBS News poll that focused on race earlier this year found that over 80% of respondents opposed banning books that criticize U.S. history, discuss race, or depict slavery. So there's some hope. In Texas, a library director and then the Library Advisory Board rejected a group of parents' complaints about books that they considered pornographic and harmful to children. Yay, Texas, hope. In a Michigan township, after a library was defunded because of complaints that LGBTQ books were grooming their kids, more than $100,000 was raised to keep the library open, at least for now. The Library Board of Trustees in a town on Long Island resolved that no displays could highlight LGBTQ themes during Pride Month. There was a huge uproar in the community, and in days, they reversed their decision. Do have power. Ike Pulver, the executive director of the Saratoga Springs Public Library, told me he's heard about other libraries where people, in lieu of banning a book or challenging a book, they just keep checking out whatever they find objectionable. Not to worry, that tactic backfires. When material keeps flying off the shelves, that's a signal to circulation. We got to get more. No town is exempt from the threat of censorship. Ike told me that the Saratoga Springs Library recently received what appeared to be a form letter from a nationally organized group. They were accusing librarians of grooming children into sexual perversion. More directly, one person contacted the library to complain about sexual themes available in children's books. It turns out that those titles weren't even available in Saratoga's children's room. And perhaps you've noticed that local school districts are not exempt from attempts to control, that is, restrict, what students can learn, talk, and read about. Yeah, boy. Okay, so our game plan tonight. Our game plan tonight is we're going to begin with a song by award-winning educator and musician Dan Berggren, whose roots are in the Adirondacks. His songs are stories of human nature and taking care of each other and our planet. So he'll be singing in a minute. And also at the end of the evening, we'll hear again from Dan with a song that he wrote especially for this occasion. After Dan's initial song, we will have 7 of the readers will speak. Then we'll have 2 short videos, and then a 10 or 15-minute intermission. I should just say a 10-minute intermission, so you all get back in your seats. And when we resume, we'll continue with the rest of the readings. Dan will do his original song, and then we'll have time for all of us to talk a little bit about where do we go from here? What's our action plan? And for now, welcome Dan.
My daughter, Jenny, is a librarian, and she's also played flute with me on this stage. And she and her husband are raising 2 girls who love to read, who devour books. When Jenny was about 3, she saw this fountain in the park, and she didn't have the word fountain. And she said, "Look, Daddy, jumping water." And that was an eye-opener for me as a person who loves words and is a songwriter. Words are like a good friend, someone to help you begin or end. They can travel afar and come back again. Words like a good friend. Words can make people sad, written with anger, spoken when mad, telling a lie when someone's been bad. Words can make people sad. Long ones and short when you read, speak, or sing. Words are wonderful things. Where would ideas be without these wings? Words are wonderful things. Words won't let you down. Their magic can turn a feeling to sound. Take a mistake and turn it around. Words won't let you down. Words can help you along. When you know language, you feel you belong. Like reading or writing or singing this song. Words can help you along. Long ones and short when you read, speak, or sing. Words are wonderful things. Where would ideas be without these wings? Words are wonderful things. Words say hello and goodbye. They can tickle or make us cry, help us wonder or answer why. Words say hello and goodbye. Words are wonderful things. Thank you.
My brief introductions are only going to scratch the surface of our wonderful author readers. They are all extremely Googleable, and I encourage you to learn more about them and their work. We're going to start off tonight with Matt Whitten, not alphabetically, but because of the date of chronological publication dates. So Matt is a resident of Lake Luzerne and Los Angeles. He's an accomplished author of numerous novels, as well as writing for TV, including House, Law and Order, Pretty Little Lies, movies, and stage plays. He's especially fond of writing thrillers. You may remember way back, Breakfast at Madeline's. You might even remember Madeline's. His book, The Necklace, published last year, is optioned for a movie by Leonardo DiCaprio. We heard it here first or second. His next book, Killer Story, is out in January. Matt selected John Steinbeck's 1937 novel, Of Mice and Men.
Hi, everybody. So, Of Mice and Men, about a mentally challenged man named Lenny and his buddy George. And it has been censored for profanity, for homosexual overtones, for racism. And by racism, I think people mean the acknowledgement that racism exists. And also, it's been censored for supposedly promoting euthanasia. There's one scene in Of Mice and Men that's one of the most beautiful scenes I've ever read. I also saw it in a play at Mount McGregor that was produced by some Saratoga actors a long time ago. And this scene, it's beautiful, it's moving, and it's iconic in American literature. And that's the scene that censors have targeted. And that's why I wanted to read this. I wanted to read this beautiful scene that is especially targeted by censors. It takes place after Lenny has killed someone by accident, and a lynch mob is tracking him down. The evening breeze blew over the clearing, and the leaves rustled, and the wind waves flowed up the green pool, and the shouts of men sounded again, this time much closer than before. George took off his hat. He said shakily, "Take off your hat, Lenny. The air feels fine." Lenny removed his hat dutifully and laid it on the ground in front of him. The shadow in the valley was bluer, and the evening came fast. On the wind, the sound of crashing in the brush came to them. Lenny said, "Tell me how it's going to be." George had been listening to the distant sounds. For a moment, he was businesslike. "Look across the river, Lenny, and I'll tell you so you can almost see it." Lenny turned his head and looked off across the pool and up the darkening slopes of the Gabalands. "We're going to get a little place," George began. He reached in his side pocket and brought out Carlson's Luger. He snapped off the safety, and the hand and gun lay on the ground behind Lenny's back. He looked at the back of Lenny's head, at the place where the spine and skull were joined. A man's voice called from up the river, and another man answered. "Go on," said Lenny. George raised the gun, and his hand shook, and he dropped his hand to the ground again. "Go on," said Lenny. "How's it going to be? We're going to get a little place." "We'll have a cow," said George, "and we'll have maybe a pig and chickens. And down the flat we'll have a little piece of alfalfa." "For the rabbits!" Lenny shouted. "For the rabbits," George repeated. "And I get to tend the rabbits." "And you get to tend the rabbits." Lenny giggled with happiness. "And live off the fat of the land." "Yes." Lenny turned his head. "No, Lenny. Look down there across the river, like you can almost see the place." Lenny obeyed him. George looked down at the gun. There were crashing footsteps in the brush now. George turned and looked toward them. "Go on, George. When are we going to do it?" "Going to do it soon." "Me and you." "You and me. Everybody going to be so nice to you. Ain't going to be no more trouble. Nobody going to hurt nobody nor steal from 'em." Lenny said, "I thought you was mad at me, George." "No," said George. "No, Lenny. I ain't mad. I never been mad. And I ain't now. That's the thing I want you to know." The voices came close now. George raised the gun and listened to the voices. Lenny begged, "Let's do it now. Let's get that place now." "Sure, right now. I gotta. We gotta." And George raised the gun and steadied it, and he brought the muzzle of it close to the back of Lenny's head. The hand shook violently, but his face set and his hand steadied. He pulled the trigger. The crash of the shot rolled up the hills and rolled down again. Lenny jarred and then settled slowly forward to the sand, and he lay without quivering. George shivered and looked at the gun, and then he threw it from him, back up on the bank, near the pile of old ashes.
Thank you. Patricia A. Nugent, the person most responsible for bringing us all together this evening, is a resident of Hadley. She's a retired school administrator who now writes creative nonfiction to give voice to those who would otherwise be silenced or forgotten. She was the editor of Before They Were Our Mothers, Voices of Women Born Before Rosie Started Riveting. Pat has selected Anne Frank, Diary of a Young Girl, published in 1947.
Thank you. As a career educator, I was stunned to find out that Anne Frank is on the list of the most challenged or banned books. It's been considered one of the most widely read and the most inspiring books in the world as an adolescent's reflections during World War II and Nazi terrorism. This isn't just a journal. It's a journal. This isn't just a diary. It's a journal depicting how Anne felt about events in her life. As a lifelong journaler myself, 2 of my own books were drawn directly from my journals. I can only hope that my introspections might someday inspire others. The most commonly voiced reason for challenging this book is Anne's few entries about her body parts and longing for intimacy, with brief confessions about her attraction to a female friend and boys. Another reason given for banning the book is that the tragic story of this engaging girl is too depressing or a downer for young readers. Yeah, genocide is a drag, especially for those being exterminated. White supremacy in any iteration must be remembered and resisted. I chose 3 entries from her diary tonight that honor her aspiration to become a famous writer, which of course she did. This one was written April 4th, 1944. I want to go on living even after my death, and therefore I am grateful to God for giving me this gift, this potential of developing myself and of writing, of expressing all that is in me. I can shake off everything if I write. My sorrows disappear, my courage is reborn. But, and this is the great question, will I ever be able to write anything great? Will I ever become a journalist or a writer? I hope so. Oh, I hope so very much. For I can recapture everything when I write, my thoughts, my ideas, and my fantasies. But then I think to myself, at the age of 14, with so little experience, how can you write anything about philosophy? I go on again with fresh courage. I think I shall succeed because I want to write. Yours, Anne. The next passage is from May 11th, 1944. My greatest wish is to become a journalist someday and later on a famous writer. Whether these leanings toward greatness or insanity will ever materialize remains to be seen, but I certainly have the subjects in my mind. In any case, I want to publish a book entitled The Secret Annex after the war. Whether I shall succeed or not, I cannot say, but my diary will be a great help. I have other ideas as well, but I will write more fully about them some other time when they have taken a clearer form in my mind. Yours, Anne. The last one was written July 15th, 1944, 3 weeks before the secret annex was raided by the SS and Dutch collaborators. Anyone who claims that the older ones have a more difficult time here certainly doesn't realize to what extent our problems weigh down on us, problems for which we are probably much too young, but which thrust themselves upon us continually until, after a long time, we think we have found a solution, but the solution doesn't seem able to resist the facts, which reduce it to nothing again. That's the difficulty in these times. Ideals, dreams, and cherished hopes rise within us, only to meet the horrible truth and be shattered. It's really a wonder that I haven't dropped all my ideals, because they seem so absurd and impossible to carry out. Yet I keep them, because in spite of everything, I see that people are really good at heart. I simply can't build my hopes on a foundation consisting of confusion, misery, and death. I see the world gradually being turned into a wilderness. I hear the ever-approaching thunder, which will destroy us too. I can feel the suffering of millions, and yet, if I look up into the heavens, I think that it will all turn out all right, that this cruelty too will end, and that peace and tranquility will return again. In the meantime, I must uphold my ideals, for perhaps the time will come when I shall be able to carry them out. Yours, Anne. Anne Frank died less than 8 months later in captivity. A 1956 play based on this book broke the German people's silence about their shame and their guilt. In 1958, Ernest Schnabel published Anne Frank, A Portrait of Courage, based on 42 interviews with people who knew her. He writes, "Above all, the diary remains. Her voice was preserved out of the millions that were silenced. This voice, no louder than a child's whisper, has outlasted the murderers and has soared above the voices of time. Ironically, the hidden door to the secret annex was a bookcase. When housemates had suggested burning Anne's diary to protect their identity, Anne declared, "If my diary goes, I go too." So today, Anne, if your diary goes, we all go too. Thank you.
Breathe. Lawrence Dudley, who lives in Glens Falls, has written several novels, screenplays, and a nonfiction work on the intersection of culture and politics, as befits a former political and media consultant. And way back in the day, he wrote for the Saratogian. We spoke earlier about how he had interviewed Lena Spencer here. His novels include New York Station and its sequel, The Hungry Blade. Lawrence selected George Orwell's 1984, which is one of the, if not the, most banned book. Lawrence?
Thank you, Barbara. Yes, actually, I was one of the journalists that she groomed at one time. So, Barbara, thank you. Anyway, 1984 was just banned in the state of Florida this month, believe it or not. It's been taken, Governor DeSantis just removed it on the list to remove from public schools in Florida. Why? Well, originally it was seen as being about a screed about the Soviet Union. Actually, it's not. It's about the destruction of truth. It's about the politics based on lies. It's about the creation of a surveillance state. It's about the breakdown of empiricism, censorship, and the injection of violence into politics. I think in the last few years, we've seen all of those things in a very scary way here in our country and in fact around the world. So I think even though it was written in 1949, it's actually more relevant probably than ever. So I picked up this passage here that I hope is relevant, and I hope it's not too long. So I'll start, and of course, I think most of us probably may have studied this in high school, so we know it's the story of Winston Smith, who was a functionary in the Ministry of Truth, which is based on lies, of course. And he is involved in re-editing and censoring things, and they're creating a new language. So, how's the dictionary getting on, said Winston, raising his voice to overcome the noise. Slowly, said Syme. I'm on the adjectives. It's fascinating. He had brightened up immediately at the mention of newspeak. He pushed his pannikin aside, took up his hunk of bread in one delicate hand and his cheese in the other, and leaned across the table so as to be able to speak without shouting. The 11th edition is the definitive edition, he said. We're getting the language into its final shape, the shape it's going to have when nobody speaks anything else. When we're finished with it, people like you will have to learn it all over again. You think, I dare say, that our chief job is inventing new words, but not a bit of it. We're destroying words, scores of them, hundreds of them, every day. We're cutting the language down to the bone. The 11th edition won't contain a single word that'll become obsolete before the year 2050. He bit hungrily into his bread and swallowed a couple of mouthfuls, then continued speaking with a sort of pedant's passion. His thin, dark face had become animated. His eyes lost their mocking expression and grown almost dreamy. It's a beautiful thing, the destruction of words. Of course, the great wastage in the verbs and adjectives, but there are hundreds of nouns to be got rid of as well. It isn't only the synonyms, there are also the antonyms. After all, what justification is there for a word which is simply the opposite of some other word? A word contains its opposite in itself. Take good, for instance. If you have the word like good, what need is for a word like bad? Ungood will do just as well. Better because it's an exact opposite, which the other is not. Or again, if you want a stronger version of good, what sense is there in having a whole string of vague, useless words like excellent or splendid and all the rest of them? Plus good covers the meaning, or double plus good if you want something stronger still. Of course, we still use those forms already, but in the final version, that newspeak, there'll be nothing else. In the end, the whole notion of goodness and badness we convert by only 6 words. In reality, only 1 word. Don't you see the beauty of that, Winston? It was Big Brother's idea originally, of course. He had this as an afterthought. A sort of vapid eagerness flicked across Winston's face at the mention of Big Brother. Nonetheless, Simon immediately detected a certain lack of enthusiasm. "You haven't a real appreciation of Newspeak, Winston," he said almost sadly. "Even when you write it, you're still thinking in Old Speak. I've read some of those pieces that you write in the Times occasionally. They're good enough, but they're translations. In your heart, you'd rather speak to Old Speak, or stick to Old Speak, with all its vagueness and its useless shades of meaning. You don't grasp the beauty of the destruction of words. Do you know that Newspeak is the only language in the world whose vocabulary gets smaller every year?" Winston did know that, of course. He smiled sympathetically. He hoped, not trusting himself to speak. Simon bit off another bit of fragment of the dark-colored bread, chewed it briefly, and then went on. "Don't you see the whole aim of Newspeak is to narrow the range of thought? In the end, we shall make thought crime literally impossible because there will be no words in which to express it. Every concept that can ever be needed will be expressed by exactly one word, with its meaning rigidly defined and all its subsidiary meanings rubbed out and forgotten. Already in the 11th edition, we're not far from that point. The process will still be continuing long after you and I are dead. Every year, fewer and fewer words, and the range of consciousness will always be a little smaller. Even now, of course, there's no reason or excuse for committing thought crime. It's merely a question of self-discipline, reality control. But in the end, there won't be any need even for that. The revolution will be complete when the language is perfect. Newspeak is Ingsoc, and Ingsoc is Newspeak, he added with a sort of mystical satisfaction. Has it ever occurred to you, Winston, by the year 2050, at the very latest, not a single human being will be alive who can understand such a conversation as we are having now? Except, began Winston doubtfully, and he stopped. It had been on the tip of his tongue to say, except the proles, but he checked himself, not feeling fully certain that his remark would in not some way seem unorthodox. Simon, however, had divined what he was about to say. The proles are not human beings, he said carelessly. By 2050, earlier probably, all knowledge of Old Speak will have disappeared. The whole literature of the past will have been destroyed. Chaucer, Shakespeare, Milton, Byron. They'll exist only in Newspeak versions, not merely changed into something different, but actually changed into something contradictory of what they used to be. Even the literature of the party will change. Even the slogans will change. How could you have a slogan like freedom is slavery when the concept of freedom has been abolished? The whole climate of thought will be different. In fact, there'll be no thought as we understand it now. Orthodoxy means not thinking, not needing to think. Orthodoxy is unconsciousness. One of these days, thought Winston with deep, sudden conviction, Syme will be vaporized. He is too intelligent. He sees too clearly and speaks too plainly. The party does not like such people. One day he will disappear. It is written in his face. And there we are. I mean, this is the kind of thing that goes on. And I think in order, whether the regime is on the left, like with the Soviet Union, or the right, like Nazi Germany, or some of the things that are sort of being postulated by the sort of Christian nationalists today, the tools are the same. The perversion of language, the modification of language, the destruction of knowledge, the destruction of empiricism, a politics based on lies. And, well, there we are. So thank the organizers for creating this great opportunity to talk about banned books. Barbara, thank you again.
Alcohol will be available during the break. Mary Sanders Shartle, a resident of Glens Falls, is an award-winning author and poet who teaches writing workshops and hosts book groups in Saratoga County and the Adirondacks. Her novel, The Truth and Legend of Lily Martindale, set in the Adirondacks, earned an Independent Publishers Book Award as well as top honors from the Adirondack Center for Writing. Mary will be reading from J.D. Salinger's 1951 classic, Catcher in the Rye.
Good evening. I'm reading from The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger because I believe that book saved my life. I was failing histrionically in a strict boarding school. I got kicked out by systematically breaking all the rules. Like Holden Caulfield, I was depressed and ended up in a psychiatric hospital. This book was about me. Theodore Dreiser described Clyde Griffiths in An American Tragedy as a pinball. Holden Caulfield is like that. I was a lot like that. Parents who fear the book's sex, violence, and profanity may really be fearing that their teenager will become a pinball, with no direction known from Dylan. I thought conformity to be senseless and stupid. Why not get lost to get found? How many of you have never read Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger? Oh, yeah, that's decent. I'm real happy about that. All right. She came in and took her coat off right away and sort of chucked it on the bed. She had on a green dress underneath. Then she sort of sat down sideways on the chair that went with the desk in the room, and started jiggling her foot up and down. She crossed her legs and started jiggling that one foot up and down. She was very nervous for a prostitute. She really was. I think it was because she was young as hell. She was around my age. I sat down in the big chair next to her and offered her a cigarette. "I don't smoke," she said. She had a tiny little weeny whiny voice. You could hardly hear her. She never said thank you either when you offered her something. She just didn't know any better. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Jim Steele, I said. "You got a watch on you?" she said. She didn't care what the hell my name was, naturally. "Hey, how old are you anyways?" "Me? 22. "Like fun you are." It was a funny thing to say. It sounded like a real kid. You'd think a prostitute and all would say, "Like hell you are," or "cut the crap," instead of, "Like fun you are." "How old are you?" I asked her. "Old enough to know better," she said. She was really witty. "You got a watch on you?" she asked me again. And then she stood up and pulled her dress over her head. I certainly felt peculiar when she did that. I mean, she did it so sudden and all. I know you're supposed to feel pretty sexy when somebody gets up and pulls their dress over their head, but I didn't. Sexy was about the last thing I was feeling. I felt much more depressed than sexy. "You got a watch on you, hey?" No, I don't," I said. Boy, was I feeling peculiar. "What's your name?" I asked her. All she had on was this pink slip. It was really quite embarrassing. It really was. "Sonny," she said. "Let's go, hey?" Don't you feel like talking for a while?" I asked her. It was a childish thing to say, but I was feeling so damn peculiar. "Are you in a very big hurry?" She looked at me like I was a madman. "What the heck you want to talk about?" she said. "I don't know. Nothing special. I just thought perhaps you might care to chat for a while." She sat down in the chair next to the desk again. She didn't like it, though. You could tell. She started jiggling her foot again. Boy, was she a nervous girl. "Would you care for a cigarette now?" I said. I forgot she didn't smoke. "I don't smoke. Listen, if you're going to talk, do it. I got things to do." I couldn't think of anything to talk about. I thought of asking her how she got to be a prostitute and all, but I was scared to ask her. She probably wouldn't have told me anyway. You don't come from New York, do you? I asked finally. That's all I could think of. Hollywood, she said. Then she got up and went over to where she put her dress down on the bed. You got a hanger? I don't want to get my dress all wrinkly. It's brand clean. Sure, I said right away. I was only too glad to get up and do something. I took her dress over to the closet and hung it up for her. It was funny. It made me feel sort of sad when I hung it up. I thought of her going in a store and buying it, and nobody in the store knowing she was a prostitute and all. The salesman probably just thought she was a regular girl when she bought it. It made me feel sad as hell. I don't know why exactly.
Richard Lovrich is a resident of Guilderland, formerly the art director at the Times Union, our competitor, formerly art director at the Times Union and creative director for the Proctors Collaborative. He is an independent creative director with clients in the Capital Region and beyond. Richard recently released, that's harder to say than Little Liberty Library. Richard recently released his book of dark, very short stories titled Have a Very Bad Day, which might explain his selection tonight of Anthony Burgess's 1962 A Clockwork Orange.
Ooh, thank you. There were a few instances of this violent and dystopian book being banned, but the banning of A Clockwork Orange really takes off with Stanley Kubrick's 1971 film adaptation, and it is undertaken not by some mommy state meddler, but by Kubrick himself. Throughout 1972 and 73, several violent crimes in Britain were said to be influenced by the film. An old man beaten to death in an underpass, a 16-year-old boy savaging a younger boy still while wearing Alex's uniform, and a woman raped by men chanting Singing in the Rain, all mimicking scenes in this beautiful but horrifying film. Stanley Kubrick withdrew A Clockwork Orange from British cinemas in 1973 and would not allow it to be seen there until his death some 26 years later. The movie was censored and edited in the US as well. Even the original movie poster was banned until a naked statue of a woman was fitted with a ridiculous pair of bra and panties. This superb and challenging book and movie both force us to examine the limits of our faith in the religion of free will. Now to the book. Our main character, Alex, and his droogs, friends, speak Natsat, an onomatopoeic rhyming language author Anthony Burgess created for his novel that jumbles English, Cockney, and Russian. We join Alex and his droogs after a fight with a rival gang. They have driven out of the city in a stolen car and have forced themselves into the home of an author and his wife. Alex narrates. That's just what I want to know. What is this? What do you want? Get out at once before I throw you out. So, poor old Dim, masked like P.B. Shelley, had a good loud smeck at that, roaring like some animal. It's a book, I said. It's a book what you are writing. I made the old galoss very coarse. I have always had the strongest admiration for them that as can write books. Then I looked at the top sheet, and there was the name, A Clockwork Orange. And I said, "That's a fair, gloopy title. Who ever heard of A Clockwork Orange?" Then I read a Malinky bit out loud in a sort of very high-type preaching golos. The attempt to impose upon man, a creature of growth and capable of sweetness, to ooze juicily at the last round the bearded lips of God, to attempt to impose, I say, laws and conditions appropriate to a mechanical creation. Against this, I raise my sword pen. Dim made the old lip music at that, and I had to smack myself. Then I started to tear up the sheets and scatter the bits on the floor. And this writer Mouge went sort of bazoomy and made for me, with his zoobies clenched and showing yellow and his nails ready for me like claws. So that was old Dim's cue, and he went grinning and going and ah for this vex dithering rot. Crack, crack, first left fisty, then right, so that our dear old droog, the red vino on tap, and in the same place like it's put out by the same big firm, started pouring and spotting the nice clean carpet and bits of the book that I was still ripping away at. Razrez. At this time, this Devochka, his loving and faithful wife, just stood like froze by the fireplace. And then she started letting out little malinky creatures, like in time to the music of old Dim's fisty work. Then Georgie and Pete came in from the kitchen, both munching away. "Drop that moonch. I gave no permission. Grab hold of this Vec here, so he can viddy all and not get away." So they put down their fatty pitchka on the table among all the flying paper, and they clopped over to the writer Vec, whose horned-rimmed ochkis were cracked, but still hanging on. And with old Dim still dancing around and making ornaments shake on the mantelpiece, I swept them all off then, and they couldn't shake no more, little brothers. While he fillied with the author of A Clockwork Orange, making his litzo all purple and dripping away like some very special sort of juicy fruit. "All right, Dim," I said, "now for the other vetch. Bog help us." So he did the strong man on the Devochka, who was still creaching away in a very horror show four in a bar, locking her rookers from the back, while I ripped away at this and that and the others going haw, haw, haw still, and really good horror show grooties they were, that then exhibited their pink glazies. Oh, my brothers, while I untrussed and got ready for the plunge. Roald Dahl said, a terrifying and marvelous book. I'd have to agree.
Carol Daggs, whose artistic name is Jazzage, is a lifelong Saratoga Springs resident, 4 generations deep. Her novel, Saratoga Brantville Blues, was a featured 2021 Saratoga Reads selection. She was also a contributor to Patricia Nugent's Before We Were Mothers. Carol is an accomplished pianist and vocalist who has played at the famed Apollo Theater. Her book tonight is Toni Morrison's 1970 novel, The Bluest Eye.
Pardon me, I felt like I was stuck to the chair. Thank you for... in thinking of my choice to read Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye, the publication date is 1970, and I thought about some of the heavier themes that she deals with. She deals with the real. So there are 2 themes that recur throughout the book, one of which is sexual violence, and another being racism and how power structures are built on racism. So the main character, Piccola, who's wishing for blue eyes, she is a victim in the book. But the passage that I would like to read, I'm not sure if this passage would have qualified for banning. It basically deals with the pain of Black women and the status of Black women. Their voices blended into a threnody of nostalgia about pain, rising and falling, complex in harmony, uncertain in pitch, but constant in the recitative of pain. They hugged the memories of illnesses to their bosoms. They licked their lips and clucked their tongues in fond remembrance of pains they had endured. Childbirth, rheumatism, croup, sprains, backaches, piles, all of the bruises they had collected from moving about the earth, harvesting, cleaning, hoisting, pitching, stooping, kneeling, picking, always with young ones underfoot. But they had been young once. The odor of their armpits and haunches had mingled into a lovely musk. Their eyes had been furtive, their lips relaxed, and the delicate turn of their heads on those slim black necks had been like nothing other than a doze. Their laughter had been more touch than sound. Then they had grown, edging into life from the back door, becoming. Everybody in the world was in a position to give them orders. White women said, "Do this." White children said, "Give me that." White men said, "Come here." Black men said, "Lay down." The only people they need not take orders from were Black children and each other. But they took all of that and recreated it in their own image. They ran the houses of white people and knew it. When white men beat their men, they cleaned up the blood and went home to receive abuse from the victim. They beat their children with one hand and stole for them with the other. The hands that felled trees also cut umbilical cords. The hands that wrung the necks of chickens and butchered hogs also nudged African violets into bloom. The arms that loaded sheaves, bales, and sacks rocked babies into sleep. They patted biscuits into flaky ovals of innocence and shrouded the dead. They plowed all day and came home to nestle like plums under the limbs of their men. The legs that straddled a mule's back were the same ones that straddled their men's hips. And the difference was all the difference there was. Then they were old, their bodies honed, their odor sour, squatting in a cane field, stooping in a cotton field, kneeling by a riverbank. They had carried a world on their heads. They had given over the lives of their own children and tendered their grandchildren. With relief, they wrapped their heads in rags and their breasts in flannel, eased their feet into felt. They were through with lust and lactation, beyond tears and terror. They alone could walk the roads of Mississippi, the lanes of Georgia, the fields of Alabama unmolested. They were old enough to be irritable when and where they chose, tired enough to look forward to death, disinterested enough to accept the idea of pain while ignoring the presence of pain. They were, in fact, and at last, free. And the lives of these old Black women were synthesized in their eyes, a puree of tragedy and humor wickedness and serenity, truth and fantasy.
After our next reader, we'll have after our next reader, we're going to see 2 short videos. I believe it's Tom Paxton, and we'll hear from Toni Morrison. And then we'll have a short break, 10 or 15 minutes, and we'll resume with the readings. So, Terry Diggory. Terry, who lives in Saratoga Springs, is a published author who taught English at Skidmore College until retiring in 2010. He is co-coordinator of the Saratoga Immigration Coalition and a member of the Saratoga Springs Poet Laureate Selection Committee. He will read from Maya Angelou's 1970, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings.
So another book by an African-American woman writer, also published in the same year as The Bluest Eye in 1970. This is the first of a series of memoirs that Maya Angelou wrote, and it has been banned and challenged for decades. It has been accused, like so many of the books that we've been hearing from tonight, of objectionable sexual content, and also, I think perhaps more honestly, in terms of expressing the motives of the accusers, for fomenting racial hatred, which of course meant hatred towards white people. The section that I'll be reading from is perhaps one of the most direct confrontations that Angelou describes with white supremacy during her growing up. It's her graduation from middle school in the segregated school that she attended in the town of Stamps, Arkansas. And the scene actually begins not with what I'll be reading from, but to set the scene for you, it actually begins with a kind of act of self-censorship. All the students are expecting that they'll go through a series of kind of ritual performances at the beginning of the ceremony, including the singing of what Angelou calls the Black National Anthem. But for some reason, the school officials decide that they're not going to sing the Black National Anthem, and it turns out that the reason for that is that a white politician is going to be addressing the audience, and they don't think it's appropriate with white folks present to sing the Black National Anthem. But as you'll see, this act of self-censorship gets undone in the response to the white politician. He really brings them down because he makes it clear that the white school that he supports is going to be getting science labs, and the black school that he's addressing at this graduation ceremony is going to be getting an upgraded woodworking shop. And that, of course, tells young Maya, along with the rest of her audience, that this is the expectation for African Americans in this society. So the passage I'll read begins with the white politician leaving the stage. Don Levy was running for election and assured our parents that if he won, we could count on having the only colored paved playing field in that part of Arkansas. Also, he never looked up to acknowledge the grunts of acceptance. Also, we were bound to get some new equipment for the home economics building and the workshop. He finished, and since there was no need to give any more than the most perfunctory thank yous, he nodded to the men on the men on the stage, and the tall white man, who was never introduced, joined him at the door. They left with the attitude that now they were off to something really important. The graduation ceremonies at Lafayette County Training School had been a mere preliminary. The ugliness they left was palpable. An uninvited guest who wouldn't leave. The choir was summoned and sang a modern arrangement of Onward Christian Soldiers with new words pertaining to graduates seeking their place in the world, but it didn't work. Eloise, the daughter of the Baptist minister, recited Invictus, and I could have cried at the impertinence of I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul. My name had lost its ring of familiarity, and I had to be nudged to go and receive my diploma. All my preparations had fled. I neither marched up to the stage like a conquering Amazon, nor did I look in the audience for Bailey's nod of approval. Bailey is her brother. Marguerite Johnson. I heard the name again. My honors were read. There were noises in the audience of appreciation, and I took my place on the stage as rehearsed. I thought about colors I hated: écru, puce, lavender, beige, and black. There was shuffling and rustling around me. Then Henry Reed was giving his valedictory address, to be or not to be. Hadn't he heard the white folks? We couldn't be, so the question was a waste of time. Henry's voice came out clear and strong. I feared to look at him. Hadn't he got the message? There was no nobler in the mind for Negroes because the world didn't think we had minds, and they let us know it. Outrageous fortune? Now that was a joke. When the ceremony was over, I had to tell Henry Reed some things. That is, if I still cared. Not rub, Henry, erase. Ah, there's the erase. Us. Henry had been a good student in elocution. His voice rose on tides of promise and fell on waves of warnings. The English teacher had helped him to create a sermon ringing through Hamlet's soliloquy. To be a man, a doer, a builder, a leader, or to be a tool, an unfunny joke, a crusher of funky toadstools. I marveled that Henry could go through with the speech as if we had a choice. I had been listening and silently rebutting each sentence with my eyes closed. Then there was a hush, which in an audience warns that something unplanned is happening. I looked up and saw Henry Reed, the conservative, the proper, the A student, turn his back to the audience and turn to us, the proud graduating class of 1940, and sing, nearly speaking, lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. It was the poem written by James Weldon Johnson. It was the music composed by J. Rosamond Johnson. It was the Negro national anthem. Out of habit, we were singing it. Our mothers and fathers stood in the dark hall and joined the hymn of encouragement. A kindergarten teacher led the small children onto the stage, and the buttercups and daisies and bunny rabbits marked time and tried to follow. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died. Yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sighed. Every child I knew had learned that song with his ABCs, and along with Jesus Love Me, This I Know. But I personally had never heard it before, never heard the words, despite the thousands of times I had sung them, never thought they had anything to do with me. On the other hand, the words of Patrick Henry had made such an impression on me that I had been able to stretch myself tall and trembling and say, I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. And now I heard, really, as if for the first time, We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. While echoes of the song shivered in the air, Henry Reed bowed his head, said thank you, and returned to his place in the line. The tears that slipped down many faces were not wiped away in shame. We were on top again, as always again. We survived. The depths had been icy and dark, but now a bright sun spoke to our souls. I was no longer simply a member of the proud graduating class of 1940. I was a proud member of the wonderful, beautiful Negro race. Oh, black, known and unknown poets, how often have your auction pains sustained us? Who will compute the lonely nights made less lonely by your songs, or by the empty pots made less tragic by your tales? If we were a people much given to revealing secrets, we might raise monuments and sacrifice to the memories of our poets. But slavery cured us of that weakness. It may be enough, however, to have it said that we survive in exact relationship to the dedication of our poets, include preachers, musicians, and blues singers.
Can you get Dan's vocal mic out of the way?
I have a book, a dangerous book that no one ought to read. It's full of sex and murder and death, omnipotence and greed. Some people want to ban my book and rip it from the shelves, though they've been known to read this book out loud among themselves. When the big bad books go boo, God knows what they might do. You'll know your kids have hit the skids when they quote Huck Finn to you. When Toni Morrison writes, good people lie awake for nights, oh, the worst will happen to you when the big bad books go boo. They've read it to their children, they've read it to their kin. They never thought that reading it could ever be thought a sin. Of course the Bible tells us we should love our neighbors well, while in real life we often tell them they can go to hell. When the big bad books go boo, God knows what they might do. You'll know your kids have hit the skids when they quote Huck Finn to you. When Toni Morrison writes, good people lie awake for nights, oh, the worst will happen to you when the big bad books go boo. Fine books you ban, the more your kids will scan. The messengers you shoot will be forbidden fruit, and the children will find out what the books you ban are about, and wonder why the rage over words upon a page. When the big bad books go boo, God knows what they might do. You'll know your kids have hit the skids when they quote Huck Finn to you. When Toni Morrison writes, good people lie awake for nights, oh, the worst will happen to you when the big bad books go boo. Oh, the worst will happen to you when the big bad books go boo.
Hitler burnt books and used a phrase that's very interesting when he was condemning a certain kind of art in Munich. He said, we have to get rid of the artistic criminal. In other words, the idea of an artist as a criminal because of the production of his art is an idea that I never heard before and since. In other words, there could be such a thing as an illegal song or an illegal book. And you have to understand that I come from a race of people for whom at one time in this country it was illegal to be taught to read. It was illegal and punishable by physical punishment and sometimes fatal punishment to learn how to read. And white people who taught black people how to read were taking the risk of being punished. So that is more than a secular event as far as I'm concerned. And I think the same sensibilities that informed those people to make it a criminal act for black people to read are the ancestors of the same people who are making it a criminal act for their own children to read. And I don't see a great deal of difference between that. There is some hysteria associated with the idea of reading that is all out of proportion to what is, in fact, happens when one reads.
Left Louisiana on the red line. Ooh.
Thanks for watching this live performance from Caffe Lena. You're supporting independent music and the mission of our historic nonprofit venue. You can find out more information about the legacy of Caffe Lena and our diverse programming at caffelena.org. Each ticket buyer will receive an email with access to this show for 1 week, and subscribers can find the archive in the recent live streams playlist on Caffe Lena TV. These live streams are made possible by our community of subscribers. Special thanks to our Virtuoso level subscribers and lifetime Caffe Lena members. Please consider becoming a subscriber to Caffe Lena TV. For $15 per month, you will have unlimited access to over 20 live streams each month, as well as our growing archive of recorded shows in the Caffe Lena Vault. Join us in building a sustainable platform for independent music. Caffe Lena TV is now available to subscribers on iOS and Android mobile apps, as well as on Roku smart TV devices. Just search Caffe Lena TV in the store and log in. You can leave an additional donation to support the artists on stage tonight by clicking the currency symbol below the chat and following the instructions to use the Caffe Lena tip jar. The Caffe Lena School of Music offers group music lessons in person and online. Each archived class is available for purchase, and subscribers to Caffe Lena TV can access the first week of select classes for free. Find out more about our music school and our amazing instructors at caffelena.org/school and find the available classes on Caffe Lena TV in the Caffe Lena School of Music section. The Caffe Lena online store is now open. Go to caffelena.org and click Shop to find all the current Caffe Lena merchandise, including shirts, hats, mugs, posters, and more. Come visit us on Phyla Street in Saratoga Springs, New York. We've got something going on every night of the week. We hope you're enjoying the show. Here are a few more of our upcoming concerts we think you might enjoy. Check out the full schedule in the upcoming live streams section of Caffe Lena TV and join us for more live music.
that line. Oh, oh, bless your soul, you crossed that line to Ohio, all the way 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 to Ohio.
Thank you.
Hello, I think we're about ready. Am I on? Is this on? I can't see you, but can you tell me if this is on? Great. Part of my job as a newspaper editor was to live and die by deadlines. We are not going to make our promise to end by 9 o'clock. So bear with us. And part of the reason, we started half an hour late because we were turning away people at the door to come in tonight. We've got a full house. So I'm happy to be here with you. I hope the others got home in time to watch the live stream. All right, so I'm going to move us along, right? Everybody okay? Lolly Davidson, a Saratoga Springs resident, is a teacher of writing who describes herself as a magical realist. She is the author of the novel Against the Grain, about advocates trying to save the redwoods. She has picked Margaret Atwood's 1985 novel, A Handmaid's Tale.
Well, I picked this book for obvious reasons, especially with the overturning of Roe v. Wade. How many people have read The Handmaid's Tale? And how many have seen the TV series? Yeah, okay. So I don't need to tell you a lot about this book. But Margaret Atwood said that she had one rule when she wrote this book, which was that everything that happened in the book should have happened somewhere. None of it is imaginary. There's no imaginary laws, no imaginary atrocities. God is in the details, they say, and so is the devil. So, even though it's fabricated, everything that's in this book has happened somewhere on earth at some time. It was banned in Kansas and Texas most recently. Sometimes it's been banned by entire countries, such as Spain and Portugal. And as you heard recently, in protest, she submitted an unburnable version for auction. She's wonderful. She says also in her introduction, I was going to donate this book, and then I got attached to it, so I'll buy a different one and donate that. Sorry. I mean, I have another copy that I read years ago, but reading this one again, I just couldn't let this one go. But she says, women are important because, of course, without women capable of giving birth, human populations will die out. That is why mass rape and murder of women, girls, and children has long been a feature of genocidal wars and of the campaigns meant to subdue and exploit a population. Kill their babies and replace their babies with yours as cats do. Make women have babies they can't afford to raise, or babies you will then remove from them for your own purposes. Steal babies. It's been a widespread, age-old motif. The control of women and babies has been a feature of every repressive regime on the planet. So I'm going to read a passage from chapter 4. A shape, red with white wings around the face, a shape like mine, a nondescript woman, in red, carrying a basket, comes along the brick sidewalk towards me. She reaches me, and we peer at each other's faces, looking down the white tunnels of cloth that enclose us. She is the right one. Blessed be the fruit, she says to me, the accepted greeting among us. May the Lord open, I answer, the accepted response. We turn and walk together past the large houses toward the central part of town. We aren't allowed to go there except in twos. This is supposed to be for our protection, though the notion is absurd. We are well protected already. The truth is that she is my spy as I am hers. If either of us slips through the net because of something that happens on one of our daily walks, the other will be accountable. This woman has been my partner for 2 weeks. I don't know what happened to the other one. On a certain day, she simply wasn't there anymore, and this is the one that is there in her place. It isn't the sort of thing you ask questions about because the answers are not usually answers you want to know. Anyway, there wouldn't be an answer. This one is a little plumper than I am. Her eyes are brown. Her name is Offglen. And that's about all I know about her. She walks demurely, head down, red-gloved hands clasped in front, with short little steps like a trained pig's on hind legs. During these walks, she has never said anything that was not strictly orthodox, but then neither have I. She may be a real believer, a handmaiden more than name. I can't take the risk. The war is going very well, I hear, she says. Praise be, I reply. We've been sent good weather, which I receive in joy. They've defeated more of the rebels since yesterday. Praise be, I say. I don't ask her how she knows. What were they? Baptists. They had a stronghold in the Blue Hills. They smoked them out. Praise be. Sometimes I wish she would just shut up and let me walk in peace. But I am ravenous for news, any kind of news, even if it's false news. It must mean something. We reach the first barrier, which is like the barriers blocking off roadworks or dug up sewers, a wooden crisscross painted in yellow and black stripes, a red hexagon which means stop. Near the gateway, there are some lanterns, not lit because it isn't night. Above us, I know, there are floodlights attached to the telephone poles for use in emergencies, and there are men with machine guns in the pillboxes on either side of the road. I don't see the floodlights in the pillboxes because of the wings around my face. I just know they are there. Behind the barrier, waiting for us in the narrow gateway, there are two men in green uniforms of the Guardians of Faith, with crests on their shoulders and berets, two swords crossed with a white triangle. The Guardians aren't real soldiers. They're used for routine policing and other menial functions, digging up the commander's wife's garden, for instance, and they're either stupid or older or disabled or very young, apart from the ones that are eyes incognito. These two are very young. One mustache is still sparse and one face is still blotchy. Their youth is touching, but I know I can't be deceived by it. The young ones are often the most dangerous, the most fanatical, the jumpiest with their guns. They haven't yet learned about existence through time. You have to go slowly with them. Last week, they shot a woman right about here. She was a Martha. She was fumbling in her robe for a pass, and they thought she was hunting for a bomb. They thought she was a man in disguise. There have been such incidents. Rita and Cora knew the woman. I heard them talking about it in the kitchen. Doing their job, said Cora, keeping us safe. Nothing safer than dead, said Rita angrily. She was minding her own business. No call to shoot her. It was an accident, said Cora. No such thing, said Rita. Everything is meant. I could hear her thumping the pots around in the sink. So one of the things that this passage kind of reminds me is that within totalitarian regimes, it seeps all the way down to the bottom to our individual relations. We can't trust anybody. We can't talk to each other. And so it strikes me with all the efforts with so many people who want a white Christian nation gaining access, being elected to our Congress and our Senate, that being kind to each other, seeing each other's humanity, is at its core a revolutionary act. Thank you.
Pam Collins joins us tonight from Wynenskill. She is a retired professor of English, devoted to literature as, in her words, the vehicle for the fullest expression of the human experience and revolutionary, evolutionary ideas. She is the author of The Wizard's Return. She will be reading from Toni Morrison's Beloved, which was published in 1987.
Good evening. You're so resilient. Still here. A lot's been said about Toni Morrison tonight, so I'm going to go a little off script, so bear with me. If Toni Morrison is an artistic criminal, I think it's not just because she wrote about slavery and the absolute brutality of it unflinchingly, but she marries that with the resilience and the grace of the human soul. And putting those two things together, I think, is what makes her as dangerous as she appears to be for some people. I think we know the reasons that she was banned, and so I'm not going to read those, other than the fact that one senator, I think from Virginia, referred to her book as moral sewage. I believe the deeper reason for the objections to Beloved is Morrison's exploration of how a mother's love could drive her to kill her own children rather than see them put in slavery. And then the long road to healing from that event. At the end of the book, Morrison's narrator says, "This is not a story to be passed on." That's kind of odd since we just had a whole book of it. But I think what that means is not that the story shouldn't be told, but that such extremities of human experience should never have to happen. I've chosen not to read one of the more brutal sections of the book, but instead one of the more heart sections of the book. Pleasantly troubled, Setha avoided the keeping room and Denver's sidelong looks. As she expected, since life was like that, it didn't do any good. Denver ran a mighty interference, and on the third day, flat out asked Paul D. how long he was going to hang around. The phrase hurt him so much he missed the table. The coffee cup hit the floor and rolled down the sloping boards towards the front door. Hang around? Paul D. didn't even look at the mess he had made. Denver, what's got into you? Setha looked at her daughter, feeling more embarrassed than angry. Paul D. scratched the hair on his chin. Maybe I should make tracks. No, Setha was surprised by how loud she said it. You know what he needs, said Denver. Well, you don't, Setha told her, and you must not know what you need either. I don't want to hear another word out of you. I just asked if, hush, you make tracks. Go somewhere and sit down. Denver picked up her plate and left the table, but not before adding a chicken back and more bread to the heap she was carrying away. Paul D. leaned over to wipe the spilled coffee with his blue handkerchief. I'll get that. Setha jumped up and went to the stove. Behind it, various cloths hung, each in some stage of drying. In silence, she wiped the floor and retrieved the cup. Then she poured him another cupful and set it carefully before him. Paul D. touched its rim but didn't say anything, as even thank you was an obligation he could not meet, and the coffee itself a gift he could not take. Setha resumed her chair and the silence continued. Finally, she realized that if it was going to be broken, she would have to do it. I didn't train her like that. Paul D. stroked the rim of the cup. And I'm as surprised by his manners as you, or her manners, as you are hurt by them. Paul D. looked at Setha. Is there history to her question? History? What do you mean? I mean, did she have to ask that or want to ask that of anybody before me? Setha made two fists and placed them on her hips. You as bad as she is. Come on, Setha. Oh, I am coming on. I am. You know what I mean? I do, and I don't like it. Jesus, he whispered. Who? Setha said, getting loud. Jesus, I said Jesus. All I did was sit down for supper, and I get cussed out. Not twice. Once for being here, and once for asking why I was cussing in the first place. She didn't cuss. No, felt like it. Look here, I apologize for her. I'm real. You can't do that. You can't apologize for nobody. She got to do that. Then I'll see that she does, Setha sighed. What I want to know is, Is she asking a question that's on your mind, too? Oh, no, no, Paul D. Oh, no. Then she's of one mind and you're of another? If you can call whatever's in her head a mind, that is. Excuse me, but I can't hear a word against her. I'll chastise her. You leave her alone. Risky, thought Paul D. Very risky. And this, I have to say, is the heart of the book, I think. For a used-to-be slave woman to love anything that much was dangerous, especially if it was her children she had settled on to love. The best thing he knew was to love just a little bit. Everything, just a little bit. So when they broke its back or shoved it in the croaker sack, well, maybe it'd have a little love left over for the next one. Why, he asked her, why you think you have to take up for her, apologize for her? She's grown. I don't care what she is. Grown don't mean nothing to a mother. A child is a child. They get bigger, older, but grown, what's that supposed to mean? In my heart, it don't mean a thing.
Jan Tramontano is a published novelist, poet, and blogger. She has returned to Saratoga Springs after 12 years in Florida, where she found the views of people on school boards regarding curriculum and allowable books to be deeply disturbing. Her most recent published work is The Me I Was With You. Jan has selected The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien, published in 1990.
Hello. This is what I have to say about this book. It is war that is obscene, not a novel written historically accurate and authentic. As with many of the banned books, The Things They Carried began with accolades. It was a finalist for the Pulitzer. It was included in the Library of Congress exhibit of America Reads, which is the public's choice for the most influential books written and read in America. It was the inspiration for the National Veterans Art Museum exhibit and was on Amazon's 2014 list of the 100 books to read in a lifetime. And now, thanks to the culture wars and what's happening, it's on different lists, a banned list. The idea that school boards in Mississippi, in Illinois, and Pennsylvania pulled this book, deeming it too profane and too graphic for high schoolers, is the typical, vague, ill-advised non-reason for pulling books, and it's dangerous. On the other side of that, I pulled a transcript that Tim O'Brien, the author of The Things They Carried, had on NPR, and there were two comments that really stood out about how important this book is. One was a veteran that had had 4 tours of duty called in, and he thinks that it should be required reading for high schoolers because that's the time when many of them are deciding whether or not they should join up, and they should know what the realities of war are. The other call was from a high schooler, from a senior, who thanked this book and thanked him because it gave her a way in to talk to her Vietnam vet dad, who was closed, and they began to talk to each other. So those are the things, those are the positive things that counteract what is going on with people who don't want this book read for no reason than it's about war. I chose this book for personal reasons. Many years ago, I was married to a Vietnam vet, and it was years before this book was written. And I really believe that had I had access to it before then, it wouldn't have changed any of the outcome, for sure. But I would have had more compassion, more understanding of the trauma that he had gone through. And I think that this book is very important for those reasons. I think that the way he conceived it is brilliant. He describes what men bring into the war, the life before, the literal, figurative, and imagined during, and the memories and mind-shaping effects that they have to live with forevermore. And it was really hard for me to choose one passage, but this one chapter is all about the things they carried. They carried USO stationery and pencils and pens. They carried sterno, safety pins, trip flares, signal flares, joss sticks, statuettes of the smiling Buddha, candles, grease pencils. They carried psyops, leaflets, bush huts, bolos, and much more. Twice a week, when the resupply choppers came in, they carried hot chow in green Marmite cans and large canvas bags filled with ice beer and pop. They shared the weight of memory. They took up what others could no longer bear. Often, they carried each other, the wounded or weak. They carried infections. They carried chess sets and basketballs, Vietnamese English dictionaries, insignia of rank, bronze stars and purple hearts, plastic cards imprinted with code of conduct. They carried diseases, among them malaria and dysentery. They carried lice and ringworm and leeches and paddy algae and various rots and molds. They carried the land itself, Vietnam, the place, the soil, a powdery orange-red dust that covered their boots and fatigues and faces. They carried the sky, the whole atmosphere. They carried it, the humidity, the monsoons, the stink of fungus and decay, all of it. They carried gravity. They had no sense of strategy or mission. They searched villages without knowing what to look for, not caring, kicking over jars of rice, frisking children and old men, blowing tunnels, sometimes setting fires and sometimes not, then forming up and moving on to the next village, then other villages where it would always be the same. They carried their own lives. The pressures were enormous. In the heat of the early afternoon, they would remove their helmets and flak jackets, walking bare, which was dangerous but helped the strain. They would often discard things along the route of the march, purely for comfort. They would throw away rations, no matter, because by nightfall, the resupply choppers would arrive with more of the same. Then a day or two later, still more. Fresh watermelons and crates of ammunition and sunglasses and woolen sweaters. The resources were stunning. And for all the ambiguities of Vietnam, all the mysteries and the unknowns, there was at least the single abiding certainty that they would never be at a loss for things to carry. Thank you.
Rachel Baum, a Saratoga Springs resident, writes the blog Bark, Confessions of a Dog Trainer, and was editor of a collection of poems and tributes for funerals and memorial services. Her poems have appeared in a wide variety of publications, and she is chair of the committee that will choose the first poet laureate of Saratoga Springs. Rachel has selected the 2005 book, The Librarian of Basra, by Jeanette Winter.
Choosing this book was kind of a no-brainer. having been a librarian for 30 some odd years. And yes, I was a dog trainer too. So the author of this story, Jeanette Winter, is also the illustrator. And she also wrote a book called Nazreen's Secret School, both of which took place in Muslim countries. And so they have both been challenged and banned in school districts, seemingly because of a bias towards Muslims. But they couch it in terms of that there's proselytizing towards a different God than the Christian one. So I think they took exception to the flyleaf, which has the quote, "In the Quran, the first thing God said to Muhammad was read." So, we were asked to donate these books to the Little Liberty Library, and we could put a footnote or whatever in the book. And so I put this: religion, like all other ideas, deserve criticism, satire, and yes, our fearless disrespect. And that was said by Salman Rushdie. So no surprise that Florida was one of the ones that, one of the school districts that decided that they could not have this book on the shelves, but also New York and a school district in Illinois. So I'm going to read a little bit of it. If I read the whole thing, you'll miss the whole charm of it. So, and of course, as a librarian, we always show the pictures when I read, so I'll show you the pictures. And then I have a little poem that I did not write, another librarian wrote, that I think is appropriate for the occasion. So Aliyah Muhammad Baker is the librarian of Basra, a port city in the sand-swept country of Iraq. I don't know if you can see this okay? Her library is a meeting place for all who love books. They discuss matters of the world and matters of the spirit. Until now. Now they talk only of war. Aliyah worries that the fires of war will destroy the books, which are more precious to her than mountains of gold. The books are in every language, new books, ancient books, even a biography of Muhammad that is 700 years old. She asks the governor for permission to move them to a safe place. He refuses. So Aliyah takes matters into her own hands. Secretly, she brings books home every night, filling her car late after work. The whispers of war grow louder. Government offices are moved into the library. Soldiers with guns wait on the roof. Aliyah waits and fears the worst. Then rumors become reality. War reaches Basra. The city is lit with a firestorm of bombs and gunfire. And I'm going to stop there and read this poem. It's called, the title is "The Librarian at the School Where Every Challenge Succeeds." And this is because the Bible is among dozens of books, including the graphic novel adaptation of Anne Frank's diary, were removed from this particular school district. I like our high school library now, the high ceiling, the tall windows inviting light, the shelves throwing their long shadows onto each other, their blonde wood so easy to dust and polish now. Something stately, a little grand, a little minimalist, a kind of Puritan austerity, I think you could say, now that all the books have been withdrawn, all the ideas removed from circulation, stored now off-site and out of sight. No more books to face or edge or try to dust those uneven tops. No more rows of books to cull for the out-of-date, the never read or checked out, at least, the ones defaced by flip-page cartoons or very personal slurs that should be kept to lavatory stalls. No more issuing fines for books late or lost. I know, as a librarian, I should miss the books, both learned tomes and flights of fantasy, but this vacuous cleanliness appeals to my love of order and simplicity. And the kids, the students, still come in with their phones where they can find the whole world in bite-sized chunks, where they can Google, scroll, and psych Wikipedia. And I do not have to check anything out or in or shush any heads bent over the little lights. I guess this is what the school board and the parents want.
Last but not least, Joe Bruchac. And after Joe is done reading, we'll have the closing song or the final song by Dan Berggren, and then we'll just wrap up with a few remarks. So last but not least, Joe Bruchac, a resident of Greenfield Center, is an enrolled member of the Nulhegan Abenaki Nation. And he helped me pronounce that. I hope I got it right. And the traditional, because you could say Abenaki or Abenaki. So there. He has published more than 170 books and over many genres. Keepers of the Earth, which uses traditional American Indian stories to teach science, has been challenged and banned, and has sold over 1 million copies. Last year, Time magazine chose his novel Code Talker as one of the 100 best young adult books of all time. His extensive body of work reflects his deep belief in indigenous traditions, equity, and human rights, and he will be reading tonight from The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie, published in 2007. Go.
It's been my good fortune over the years to know many writers, and Sherman Alexie is one of them. I'm going to tell you a little anecdote which is not meant to praise me. Sherman and I were doing a program together about 7 years ago, and he embarrassed me. He said, I'm a writer because of Joe Bruchac. And then he explained. A number of years ago, I edited an anthology of American Indian poetry, which was assigned to him by one of his college teachers. And Sherman said when he read that, he suddenly realized Indians could write and be published. Because of his education, his background, he had never thought of himself as a writer. The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian has been challenged more than almost any other book since its publication in 2007. In fact, one of the interesting stories about that challenging is that in one particular town, I won't say where it was, the school board banned the book, and a couple of boys who were teenagers who purchased the book at a bookstore were arrested by the police as they walked out. Because the police were convinced that because it was banned, it was illegal for them to read it. Of course, the charges were later dropped. It's a book that's intensely personal for Sherman. I know from stories he's told me that his main character had many of the experiences that he had himself as a young person, that like the main character, he had physical challenges, that like the main character, he took a science book in one of his reservation school classrooms and looked at it and discovered the name written in the back of a person who had used it was his mother. That was how old the books in his library were. And so, like the main character, he finds himself going to a school in a nearby community where he is literally almost the only Indian. It begins with these words. I was born with water on the brain. Okay, so that's not exactly true. I was actually born with too much cerebral spinal fluid inside my skull. But cerebral spinal fluid is just the doctor's fancy way of saying brain grease. And brain grease works inside the lobes like car grease works inside an engine. It keeps things running smooth and fast. But weirdo me, I was born with too much grease inside my skull, and it got all thick and muddy and disgusting, and it only mucked up the works. My thinking and breathing and living engine slowed down and flooded. My brain was drowning in grease. But that makes the whole thing sound weirdo and funny, like my brain was a giant French fry. So it seems more serious and poetically accurate to say, I was born with water on the brain. Okay, so maybe that's not a very serious way to say it, very serious, but maybe the whole thing is weird and funny. But geez, did my mother and father and big sister and grandma and cousins and aunts and uncles think it was funny when the doctors cut open my little skull and sucked out all that extra water with some tiny vacuum? When Sherman went to a non-native school, when our main character goes to that non-native school, what happened to him, I think, is part of the reason this book was banned, because it exposes the consistent racism that is still leveled at Native Americans across this continent. They stared at me, the Indian boy with the black eye and swollen nose, my going-away gifts to my friend Rowdy on the res. Those white kids couldn't believe their eyes. They stared at me like I was Bigfoot or a UFO. What was I doing at Reardon, whose mascot not only was an Indian, making me the only other Indian in town? So what was I doing at racist Reardon, where more than half of every graduating class went to college? Nobody in my family had ever gone to college. Reardon was the opposite of the res. It was the opposite of my family. It was the opposite of me. I didn't deserve to be there. I knew that. All the kids knew that. Indians don't deserve shit. By the way, the bad language in this book has been considerably singled out by those who don't understand what bad language truly is. And just to sort of soothe our souls, let me share with you the sound of a native flute. Thank you for listening to all of us tonight. Thank you for being here.
I add my thanks to all of you here and behind the camera, and to the organizers, and to Pat Nugent, who, if she hadn't asked me to be part of this, this next song never would have been written. And I hope as you hear it that you will jump in and sing on the chorus. I'll begin with the chorus. Free, free to read, free to read, free, free to read. The books you choose are a walk in someone else's shoes. We need to be free to read. Grapes of wrath, midnight children, brave new world. American Psycho, Invisible Man, Diary of a Young Girl. Beloved Lawn Boy, The Handmaid's Tale of Mice and Men. The Kite Runner, Alchemist, To Kill a Mockingbird, Go Tell It on the Mountain. Free, free to read, free to read, free, free to read. The books you choose are a walk in someone else's shoes. We need to be free to read. The color purple, a clockwork orange, mouse the bluest eye. Beyond magenta, all boys aren't blue. 13 reasons why. One flew over the cuckoo's nest. I know why the cage bird sings. New Kid, Ghost Boys, Harry Potter, the Lord of the Rings. Free, free to read, free to read, free, free to read. The books you choose are a walk in someone else's shoes. We need to be free to read. Slaughterhouse 5, 1984, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Out of darkness, genderqueer, her body and other parties. Last exit to Brooklyn, city of thieves, Lolita Animal Farm. The Great Gatsby, Captain Underpants, a farewell to arms. Free, free to read, free to read, free, free to read. The books you choose are a walk in someone else's shoes. We need to be free to read. Free, free to read, free to read, free, free to read. The books you choose are a walk in someone else's shoes. We need to be free to read. We need to be free to read.
This has been so awesome. So where do we go from here? We've solved all the problems on a little bookmark. So there's a bookmark floating around there, out there somewhere, with just some ideas to get us started. Food for thought, and food for action. That's not mine, is it? I'm so sorry. A reminder to water my plants. I thought I'd be home. I kid you not. Because I'm actually watching plants for one of my children, and I didn't want them to die in my watch. Okay, back to the bookmark. We need to be proactive, right? We need to talk with people in our church, our temple, our mosque, our book club, wherever you're working, whether it's volunteer or paid, on the pickleball court, with relatives you're still speaking with parents and grandparents you see at the kids' games or at other gatherings, and with young people, with high schoolers and college students, or college-age young people. Subscribe to the American Library Association newsletter and check out their website. It's got a wealth of information. Look up PEN America. There's actually a fair number of anti-censorship organizations out there. Support local and national media. Celebrate reading during Banned Book Week and other times too. This year it's September 26th to October 2nd. The theme is Books Unite Us, Censorship Divides Us. So we're ahead of the curve here. Know what the other side is up to. It's painful but necessary to be aware of the strategies of groups like Moms for Liberty and Parents Defending Education. Go to public meetings, especially school board meetings, or figure out who in your group will be the reporter for that evening. Even when a newspaper is trying to send a reporter to a meeting or to a school board, they're not going to be there all the time. They're not going to be there as often as we would like. We might need to cover things ourselves. There is such a thing as citizen journalists. Some of you might already be doing that. Know who is in office and who is running for office. Ask direct, tough questions and share what you learn. Use both mainstream media and social media to make your voice heard. Be supportive of your public and school librarians. They are doing a job regardless of their point of view. Vote. Yes. Vote. And if you're really motivated, run for office, or at least convince someone else to run with your support, and help candidates here and elsewhere. I know we're running way over time. Is there anyone who feels like compelled that there's something that you want to add to the conversation tonight? We'll be continuing this conversation, I'm sure. Okay. In that case, I want to do two things before I close. I want to thank everyone who was involved in reading, organizing this, creating and supporting the Little Liberty Library, bringing us all together tonight. All of the readers from the Caffe Lena and the staff here, Patricia Nugent, Linda Latender for being the nudge.
She hasn't asked me on a walk since, by the way.
She's been busy. The most apt sentence to conclude this evening, I think, comes from the youngest author of a banned book, Anne Frank. How wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world. So let's get to it. Good evening.